Hi, I'm Josh Skelton with the Blue Fusion. I am a longtime music industry guy, 20 plus years in the music industry and the performing side and uh, education, musical instruments, sync on both sides of that conversation, both as an artist and on the buyer side too. And I now am with Blue Fusion marketing agency that's been around for 20 years and has a lot of um, experience in that world, and we're putting all those things together, and I love that. I think the music industry has a lot of ground to be gained by being involved in digital marketing, and I'm excited to present to you some ideas. So uh, that kind of gets into like why we're here. We love music, we have something to offer, and we want to help. So that's what this is all about, just giving the music industry some tools that we have found to be really useful so that it can advance itself. We're in a very much a changing world right now, especially on in the online space. I think everyone's aware of that. That's partially due to the fact that we've all experienced targeted advertising for a long time now, and we're kind of a little bit more wary of it than we once were. We have seen ads that are very driven to just us for many years now, and we're like less trusting of advertisers than we were even before. That's kind of like that has diminished over time as advertising has gotten better and more targeted. People have become more and more skeptical of the things that they hear from advertisers. So there's that. There's AI that's changing the landscape. There's a lot of things that we want to be aware of. The good news here is that for musicians, that it's a problem that demands a creative solution, and musicians are creative people. So it's exactly the right community to thrive in this kind of environment. We just intend here to, like I said, give you some tools for success so that you can use your creativity to the best of its ability in this space. So, first, I want to talk about how advertisers tell the story of their prospects. And notice that I say here, tell their story instead of tell your story, because that's the very first and most important distinction that I want to draw here is that you want to tell the story from the perspective of the buyer. We're all used to seeing content now online that's directed to us and our own experience versus someone talking about themselves and what they offer. Framing what it is that you offer from the perspective of someone who's going to experience it or buy it and touch it and hold it or use this service or somehow grow from it is crucial to them really understanding and connecting to what it is that you offer. We're just, as I said, we're used to that now. And the rest of it kind of gets thrown off as noise. If it's just, hey, we do this for you, we offer this, we made this thing, that can get thrown off as noise very quickly versus this is how your life is going to change if you experience this. So that's the very first part of that. One example of that comes to mind for me. I see this a lot with recording studios. Actually, some recording studios do this really well, but like I see a lot of time with recording studios, their web pages will be full of information about the sort of mechanical components of their studio. They'll get into different processors that they have, all their outboard gear, all their microphone collection. They have an SSL board, tuned rooms, and that kind of thing. That's all great, and that's how they do what they do, and having those tools is really powerful for them. However, from the perspective of an artist or a producer who might like to book that space, those that are going to understand what that stuff means really are least likely to want to use their services. The people that really are going to get it are the people that have studios themselves, either their own home studios or there are other producers that run their own studios. For artists and producers that aren't engineers, they are really more concerned with three things. One, how their music is going to sound if it's recorded there. Two, what the experience of recording there is going to be like. And three, how much it's going to cost them to do a record there and how they're going to pay for that. And that gets lost, I think, a lot on recording studio websites. I think like a better choice could be to I kind of identify the genres that a studio does really well, because every studio like has like only some genres that they lean into, and then have a video example of each genre, of an artist in each genre recording in that space. It's like really great. And that would give someone an idea, number one, what their music might sound like if they recorded there. If they're an indie band or if they're a reggae band or whatever it is that they're doing, like they can see a band that's in their genre and be like, oh, if I did a country record in this space, then my record would sound like this. And it would be like this to record there because they see the video of somebody in that space and how much space they have between themselves and the other musicians and how wall off they are or not, or what the vibe in the room is, if it's a candle lit or if it's just really blue lighting. Like all that stuff is going to matter to artists, like how they're going to feel when they're making their record. So I'm sure that whatever you're offering in the music industry is, there's a way that you can imagine how to reframe what it is that you offer in a similar way, in a way that like really gets at what someone's going to experience and what they're going to feel versus just what you do. Like we make records with great gear and in this beautiful space. Like, okay, cool. But this is what it's going to feel like and sound like to do it. The second to that is kind of related here is to find emotion, which again, this is the music space. This is a great place to do that. It still can be really easy to overlook that. One thing that comes to mind for me is with like a certain technology offering, like if you have a plugin or something like that, that it emulates a vintage piece of rack gear, for instance. You could say like, this plugin emulates an 1176, like great, but then what is that going to do for an artist and their music? Like if you instead showed an A/B, like using that plugin or not using that plugin, and with a piece of music that is really well suited for it, then someone could get a really clear understanding of like how their music might sound different with that product or without it. Likewise, you could create an aesthetic around it too. If it's like if your product is all about like a vintage feel, then shoot the thing in a room that's decked out that way. Like have your have the people in your ad be like sitting in a vintage couch with vintage lights and wood walls and that kind of thing. Like shoot it in that kind of a space so that the aesthetic conveys the emotion of using the product versus just getting into the technicals of what it offers. That's how the technicals are, how the emotion is achieved, but the emotion is really the thing that buyers are interested in. And that is like every industry. And in the music industry, it's like even more important because it is such an emotionally driven space. Next is to get radically specific. Anytime on a website, I see this language that says like, whether you're this or this is right for you. If I ever see that, I feel already lost. As a buyer, I don't want to see that I exist within an umbrella of offerings. I want to see that I am the one person that is right for this offering. In fact, we had this really interesting experience a while ago where we were looking for a technology solution for something that we were trying to accomplish, and we found several offerings of that. We found one of them that we felt like did it very well, but it also did like 10 other things. And then we found another offering that only did the one thing that we needed it for. And we immediately felt like the tool that only had one function we assumed that it would be automatically better at that function than the one that had multiple functions. That isn't necessarily the case, but we didn't notice that about ourselves, how we felt that. And I feel like as advertisers, that's a really important thing to note. That's a really powerful aspect of digital advertising, in fact, is that you can have a message that's catered to only one community, rather than like billboard advertising or television advertising, where you have to cast a really wide net and have a very broad message for whoever's driving on I-40 or whoever's watching the Super Bowl. You get to be very specific about who you intend to reach with your ads in the digital space. And that allows you to have a message that's very catered to them, so that when they receive that message, they think that they can feel like, oh yeah, this is for me. And this is the thing that I'm looking for. So as much as you can narrow down your message based on a number of different factors about that person or that offering or that like language pattern, which we'll get into more in a couple minutes, the better off you're going to be. The last thing here that I want to mention is flipping around your language. And what I mean by that is to use the language that your prospects use about your offering rather than the offering that you use internally, like within your own company, within your own the community. You likely have the correct terms for that. I use correct in quotes because language is very flexible, and your correct terms for what it is that you offer may not be what people who are less knowledgeable use to speak about that particular offering or that particular product. And it's important to be aware of that because if someone, for instance, searches something on the internet for something with the wrong terminology, and you're not aware of that, you might they may not ever meet you. They may not ever see you because they may not get served an ad if you're not using that term as a keyword. They might not see their own language, their own term for the thing. So they might see the correct term for it and not even know what that is. They might, if they're not informed enough, they may not know what that is. So rather than leaving on the table all of the people who are not the absolute most informed, which again are the people like your peers versus your customers, appeal to your customers by allowing for their ignorance in the language and go ahead and feed that back to them. I'll give you an example. And this isn't like a real world example, but just one that we can understand. Like, say, for instance, like people said that they were looking for an SM57 for vocals, right? We know SM57s is an instrument mic, and then the version of that that's for vocals is an SM58, the windscreen on it, right? But say that wasn't common knowledge, and people said often searched like, I want an SM57 for vocals. Where do I find an SM57 for vocals? Well, you could not entertain that, and you could just say SM58, and they'll be like, no, that's not what I want. That's a different microphone. What I want is an SM57 that's designed for vocals. Or you could just accept that and say, hey, we offer for you an SM57 that's made for vocals. And then once they get to your site, once they get to you, you can choose to educate them and say like, okay, so this SM57 that you're looking for vocals, that's called an SM58. And then offer them that product there. And that's, again, that's like a nonsensical sort of example in a way. That's not a real world example, but just to kind of frame it so you have an idea. I'm sure for whatever it is that you offer, there's ways that people who are less educated than you speak about it that's incorrect. And sometimes harnessing that incorrect language is really powerful because it's how your customers talk about their needs. So really getting to know what they say about it is really powerful. So next up, I want to talk about some of our most important strategies for 2024 in the digital advertising space. First thing is transparency, honesty, and vulnerability. And this goes back to what I was saying initially, which is that people are more skeptical than they've ever been of advertisers. They don't want to feel advertised to. They don't want to feel like they're encountering something that's salesy. We're like ever more resistant to that idea. And instead, like if you're very honest and you're very real with people, then it's going to appeal to them a lot more. Now, it's a very interesting and difficult dichotomy, like how that dynamic plays into what I was just talking about. So I was just talking about framing things from the point of view of your prospect, from your potential client. And here I'm saying to be vulnerable and honest about yourself. So like, how do those two things work together? That can be an interesting sort of game. But I think that like finding the way that those two things work is going to be incredibly important in 2024. I'll give you an example of one place that I thought that I saw this done really well recently, and that was in an ad for a company that said, you know, we have been providing our offering successfully for many years, and we just recently decided to shut down our entire company, our very successful entire company, and then rebuild the whole thing from scratch. And we did that because we realized that there was a better way to do it, so that our customers could experience this and this and this and this and these things could happen for them, which they are not getting under the way that we've been doing it. Even though this was successful, we realized that we could have this dramatically greater effect for people. And where the transparency, honesty, and vulnerability comes in there is they're being vulnerable and like letting you know that they haven't always like you know, made the perfect decisions 10 years in advance every single time. They recognize in themselves, like, you know, we could do this better. And they are being upfront about that. They're being honest about their sort of human nature and looking at their own actions and seeing ways that they can make a change for the better. And that's appealing to that kind of draws you in and be like, oh yeah, like you guys decided to do something better. It also provided them an opportunity to make a comparison with what they offer now, and basically what their competition is doing by comparing their new business to their old business. They didn't say that they were comparing themselves to the competitors because that feels salesy, but by comparing themselves to their previous selves, which they said was like more like their like the industry standard, right? Like we used to be like the industry standard. Now we're not like what's going on in the industry. We're this different thing. We've learned better. It's just such an interesting and compelling way to show how they're different than their competitors without like doing that riff of saying like, oh, you know, you want this and this and this better than the competitors, come with us, we're the best ones out there, right? Very, very different story to say, this is why we're better. I just love that. So in your own business, I'm sure there's a way that you can think of like how to be really clear about who you are. Also, if you have wins, like be honest about that. I think there's like some fear about that you want to come out as being like sort of braggy or something like that. But if you're like, yeah, we've gotten up to 70 times return on ads, which we have, and so we like to be clear about that because we're proud of that, and that's part of that honesty and vulnerability too. Like we've done great things for people, and we want to be clear about that. So then, first party data. I want to get into that next part. First party data is like mailing lists, that kind of thing. If you have people that subscribe to a mailing list, or you have a list of emails from people that have bought from your site, if they bought a plugin from your site or something like that, or if they subscribe to your newsletter, that kind of information is a really powerful thing in the months and probably years ahead. Number one thing is that third party cookies. The third party cookies are the ways in which websites will track your visit there. You've all seen this, the ads that kind of follow you around the internet after you've been to a website, and third-party cookies are how that's done. And there are a lot of laws that are changing that are making that more and more difficult for advertisers to do. And a lot of like browsers, big browser companies are beginning to respond to that and to remove the capabilities of tracking in that respect. So advertisers are having to make a shift now. And think that through. We still have that capability in some cases, but it's diminishing over time. So having first party data helps to replace that, because instead of informing the AI that is in ad platforms who visited your website, you can inform them that like, here's who our customers are. Go find people who are like this list. And so that's kind of a big part moving forward. Also, in the meantime, we still have both things really in play too. So there's not really a bad time to get started with that. If you are using third-party cookies now to track website activity and you have customer data, it's even more for the machine learning to work with. And then you'll be just set up for success in the future when that's more what we lean into. The other reason for that is that mailing lists can be a great source of conversions but by themselves, and especially as time changes and the whole ecosystem of ads change, and people are wanting to engage more with brands versus just be sold products. Mailing lists are a great way to engage with people in a more personal, vulnerable, and transparent way. Meaning, you can use ads to drive people instead of right to the product and sell this, like buy this product, right? You can drive them to a mailing list, like sign up for our mailing list and get free information on a weekly or monthly basis, or whatever it is, and engage with us. Get a chance to like learn about what's new and find out like get tips and tricks for how to use our plugin to make your record really great, or get learn about our new like e-learning offerings or whatever it is that you have. Like engage in conversation there, and then in those emails you can invite people to convert, and that's a really powerful system for conversion, especially going forward. Next is that social is changing. The way that people interact with social is changing because the platforms themselves are changing. Social platforms are becoming less and less about just a feed of sort of expected traffic, I would say. And what I mean by that is that it used to be the case that you would follow a certain number of people or companies and you would only see content from them. And that's not the case anymore. In most social platforms, you're starting to see a mix of the people that you chose to follow, and then other things that you didn't choose to follow that the machine learning is just deciding that you may likely be interested in. And so in that respect, viewers on social media are becoming more and more used to seeing content that they didn't necessarily choose, but that they may still like. And that is a really big advantage for advertisers. And the reason for that, I feel, is that we're already now more used to seeing a message from somebody that we haven't met yet. And so when we see an ad now, it's not going to stand out in the same way that it used to. If it's like, someone we follow an ad, like, who's this? Okay, whatever. Someone we follow an ad. Right. And now it's like someone we follow, some new information that's just an organic reel or whatever. And then someone else that we follow, and it's something else that we don't follow. And then we have an advertiser now that those advertisements can blend in a little bit more with the content that the algorithm chooses to show us. If it's done well, if you have an advertisement that is done in a way that's entertaining, in the same way that the things that the machine learning is showing them is entertaining. So if you create something that's like a great piece of organic content and then use that as an ad, that could be a great way to get people to stop and watch your ad in a way that was like probably harder to do not that long ago. Secondly, if you're using organic social to advertise your product, then you should understand this too, because it used to be the game that you'd want to get a bunch of followers to your particular platform, and then you would blast out content to them, and they would all see it. That's not the case anymore. It's now the case that like people will see your content if it's good and if it's compelling, whether they're your follower or not, and they will not see it if it is not compelling. The machine learning will figure out quickly that it turns people off or it makes people want to like get out of the platform and go do something else with their lives, and it will stop showing your content to your followers or anyone else for that matter. So that's just like things to keep in mind and how that has shifted for both advertisement on social and organic posting on social. The last thing that I want to say here is that is this position that we find AI is really important, and that is that AI can assist, but it can't drive just yet. Uh, and that's a really interesting place that we're in now. And to continue that analogy, you think about like how the newest cars work right now, and they can do a lot of the things that would equate to driving. They can do a lot of the tasks. They can brake when there's a car in front of them. They can stay within a lane. They can maintain a speed. They can sometimes park by themselves. They could do a lot of these things that we would consider driving, but we're not yet to the point where we can take a nap in the driver's seat and we're just like hand over the keys to the car and like let it take us there. We still have to maintain control of the vehicle. And I feel like today, and it can change any time, but today, that is the place that AI is in multiple different areas too, certainly with ad platforms. Despite what the owners of those ad platforms would like us to believe. There's a really strong push by Google and Meta and some of these other platforms to have advertisers give over all of the control to their machine learning. And that is greatly to their benefit, because if you give control of your advertisement to their machine learning, then they can use all that data more easily to train it and to learn and figure out how to find success, which makes their AI better. It doesn't necessarily make your ads win quicker or cheaper or more often. It just helps that platform. And to that end, there's a lot of aspects that we find the AI doesn't do as well as a human being would, and so it makes your ads perform sort of worse if you give over all the control to an AI, which is to the benefit of the ad platform too. If you have to spend more money to get the same result on Google, then well, Google gets more of your money. So to that end, we tend to like to maintain control of some areas of advertising online where we recognize that it's very important to do that. And we're very aware of like where in each platform AI is very useful and where it makes sense to allow it to take over. And like the self-driving car, like let it park it or whatever. And where it's really important for us to like still hold on to the wheel so that we get the best results from the campaigns that we're running. And that shifts all the time and we're constantly learning. But that's a nuance to be like very, very clearly aware of, I feel. So next up, I want to go over what we call the Yellow Brick Road website technique. Uh, that is obviously based on the story of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And if you remember that story, Dorothy is on this singular yellow brick road pathway all the way to Emerald City for the entirety of the story. There's not a lot of offshoots from that road. It's just one road that she travels the entire time. And websites oftentimes will have a lot of like different places for you to go. You'll arrive at a website and there'll be like a million options for you. Like if you're this, you go over here. If you're this, you go over here. If here's my member login, or this is for, this is for singers over here. This is for drummers over here. This is for people that are studio producers. This is for someone who's a guitar player, right? Um, and we find that rather than taking that approach and trying to cast this wide net and giving someone a super highway to try to navigate, if you do that, it becomes like trying to get around Boston, right? If you've ever been there, it can be very difficult to know where you are. Even here in Nashville, it can be a little bit complicated to know where you're going if you're not very, very familiar with it. If you're first arriving at a website, of course, you don't understand the highway system like at all. But if it's one singular yellow brick road and you don't have any choices to make, but just to keep moving along that road, it's such an easier user experience, and that's greatly to your advantage. What I have in mind here is that before a prospect even arrives at your site, it's likely that you have in mind for them a single action that you'd like for them to take. And in fact, I would say with every community that visits your website, you probably per community have one action that you want them to take. And that's like signing up for a contest of yours, or downloading a product, or enrolling in a course, or whatever it is that you do. You have a thing that you want them to do, and you have that in mind already. So anything that isn't compelling them to take that one action that you want that community to take, is just a distraction from that one action, and is friction that will keep them from taking that action. And it might seem that like giving them all this evidence and all these different places to go so that they can feel like they have enough information is the right path to take, but it doesn't actually work that way. So the Yellow Brick Road website is really like this. Like you start with really quick message at the top. And you've seen websites like this, a big hero at the top, they call it, a big image, and like a quick blurb, like a sentence or two in large print that just lets people know where they are, and then a button that invites them to take the action that you want them to take right away, because there's a certain portion of your community that's going to arrive at your website already familiar with what you offer, and they're going to be ready to move right then. So there's no reason not to take advantage of that urgency. Let them convert right away. Let them take the action. Then for those that don't feel that way, they can keep scrolling. And when they do, give them some top level information that might help them make their choice. Maybe like a little bit more clarity. Like, yes, I'm really at the website that I thought I was. And yes, this is really the product that I was seeking. And yes, this indeed is going to affect my life in the way that I thought it was going to. And then another invitation for them to take the action that you want, the same action. And then for those people that aren't compelled yet, a little bit more information, and then another invitation to act, and a little more information, another invitation to act, right? Part of this is sort of inspired by the way that newspapers are would traditionally be written, like a news article be traditionally written. The idea with those sort of articles is that not everyone has the same amount of time to read through a whole article. And so you don't want to construct the article in a way that they won't know what the story is unless they read the entire thing, because not everybody's going to do that. So rather than kind of telling a narrative like you would normally tell a story in a newspaper article, it's smart to start by giving someone a quick statement, high level of what the story is. And then in the next statement or the next paragraph, get into a little bit more fine detail, and then a little bit more fine detail, and a little bit more fine detail. So that way, everyone who reads any portion of the article is going to understand what happened, and the people who read more into it are going to have more detail about what happened. But everyone's going to know man landed on the moon, or whatever the article is about, right? That's how these Yellow Brick Road websites can work, where everyone's going to know what this action is that they want, that is wanted to be to be moved on. Everyone's going to know what this website's about. And then the more they go down it, the more qualifications they get for why this is such a great choice for them. And different people are going to need a different amount of information before they decide to make that choice. So that is the Yellow Brick Road website technique. Next, I want to talk about platforms. And this gets really specific. So it's really hard to be prescriptive here without understanding more about your business and what you offer. So, for starters, I just want to invite you to reach out any way that you want to. If you got an email with a link to this event, I want you to feel free to reply to that and set up a time and we can talk about what platforms would be good for you. We're happy to have those kinds of conversations. If you comment on this, whatever. We'll have contact information in this at the end of this presentation too. Any way that you want to reach out to us, if you want to have a conversation about platforms, that's really the best way for you to learn what platforms are going to be the best for your business because it's so individual. That all said, I will say this one thing that sort of applies to everybody, and that is that you want to be very aware of where your community hangs out and you want to be very clear about how that differs for where you hang out on the web and where even the majority of people hang out on the web. It could be the case, for instance, that your community only hangs out on Reddit. That's not the biggest advertising platform on the internet at all. It's nowhere close to the size of like Google or Meta or one of those. However, if that's where your community lives, then maybe that's where you should advertise because that's where they go. They may not like use Google as much. They may not go to Facebook very often. So be where they are. And that's a really clear distinction between your own web experience and that what that might be like for your prospects. If you go to one platform a lot, you go to LinkedIn a lot, you're going to probably experience LinkedIn as the most important social platform. But that may just be what you prefer. And even though you're selling to a community and that community is like buying your product, you might think that that means that their preferences are going to match yours. And it doesn't necessarily. So be very clear about that. Research your community, find out where they like to hang out, and speak to them in that place. That's like the one thing in the social platform idea that I think sort of applies to everybody. But again, we're happy to have conversations about like what's going to work for you. That's just an interesting conversation that we're always happy to have. So then I also want to like go through a example strategy that we take. Like this is how we might construct a Google search campaign. The reason I want to pick this is that the way that we think of search ads is has very much to do with the way that we sort of conceptualize everything. So it kind of gives you a window into how we think about advertising online. Yeah, let me get into that, and I think that you'll see what I mean as I go through that. First is that we would start with keyword research. And what that looks like is just using tools like Google and SEMrush, like Google Ads specifically. I mean, there's tools within the Google Ads platform that allow you to research how people search and research what terminology people use to search for certain things and see trends of those terms to see like how they're growing and how they've changed over the last 12 months and get a lot of data about the way that people search for things that are relevant to what it is that you offer. And it's really powerful to get some of that information. You might learn some things about the terminology that your prospects use. As we talked about earlier, they might use some kind of like wrong language for the things that you offer. And you'll learn that if you do some of this keyword research. So then we would then organize a bunch of what we would call keywords. And those are just phrases that people use for searches. It's just like literally a set of words that somebody would type into the search engine that then we now have access to that phrase and we see how many people use that phrase and we understand that if it's a lot then that's an important phrase to have in mind. So then that phrase becomes a keyword, and then we store all of these keywords together and then organize them, and we organize them according to really a couple things, like one, language patterns, and two, like specific offerings. So for instance, if you're a music instrument manufacturer and you sell guitars and you sell drums and you sell like microphones and PAs, for instance, that might be one way that we would divide a set of keywords about your store or about your manufacturing company. And so we have our guitar keywords and our drum keywords and have that organized that way. And if it's like a service, we might use a way to organize it that's based on a frame of mind. And that is like how people conceptualize of the problem they're trying to solve online. So they might say, I'm I need a plan for how to get better sounding vocals in my studio. Or they say, I want a product to help me get better sounding vocals in my studio. Or I want to hire someone to help me. Like I want a service, somebody to help me get a better vocals in my studio. Ultimately, they all want the same thing, and they all may want, like if you have like a vocal processing plugin, they all may want that same thing, but the way that they think about their problem and the way they voice that problem really matters. And if we see that in these keywords and these searches that we have some of those patterns starting to show up, it's really smart to divide those up and to organize those in that way. And the reason for that is that it gives us an opportunity to advertise according to the frame of mind of the person who's searching in these specific ways. So if somebody says, I want a plan for how to get better sounding vocals, well, then you can offer a plan with an ad and then lead them to a page on your site where you outline a plan that includes your plugin. And then offers them a way to download that plugin. Here's what you do: you set up this way, you do this, you put a windscreen in front of your your microphone, you treat walls in these certain way if you want to get that detailed with it, and then put this plugin ahead of your ahead of the main bus on your vocal chain there. And if they're looking for a product, then you can go right to the plugin. If they're looking for a service, maybe you have like some kind of coaching thing that is a kind of like a sales slash coaching system where somebody can get on the phone real quickly with somebody and talk through like how to do it, and then in the service they can say like, yeah, you need this, you need this, you need this plugin. I'm just making that up, but that's the ways in which these different frames of mind can be used to speak directly to how somebody's thinking about it. And that's important because if somebody wants a plan for getting better vocals and they go to a page that just has a thing, like a product that just has the plugin by itself without a plan, they're going to feel like this isn't what I'm looking for. This is a thing. I need a plan. And likewise, if somebody is looking for just the product and they find this big long plan, like, this is too much information. I just want the VST. Like I know how to do this. So how they frame it, how they're thinking about it, and how you express what it is that you have to offer really matter. When you can line up with them, people are like, oh, what a relief. I have found the thing that I'm looking for. I found the plan, and oh, the plan like includes this VST. Great. Let me get that VST real quick. What's my next step in the plan? Right? And that becomes a really low friction sale at that point. So then that gets into our next step, which is like creating ads and corresponding landing pages there. So you take these frames of mind or these different like, service offerings, product offerings that you have, and you have ads that match up with this grouping of keywords. And the ads have the same product offering or the same language patterns that the keywords have. And then those ads direct to a page that you've created for that group of keywords that uses the same language pattern or speaks to the same service offering or product offering that is in the ads and is in the keywords. Having keywords, ads, landing page all line up in one like ecosystem. That's why we're talking about this. Like we're we're a part of the ads part of the ecosystem, but we recognize that if the landing page part isn't there too, if the whole thing isn't connected there, it's not going to work as well as it will if you have it all like really connected. Then our next step would obviously just be like set up tracking and whatever and launch the thing. That's how we would conceptualize a search campaign. And really this idea of the search campaign, the keywords themselves can be used for targeting video ads or display ads. So like these concepts apply to a lot of different things. The idea is just having a very connected ecosystem. And that's why I wanted to express with, demonstrating how we would make a search campaign. So then once you have ads out there, you're starting to get sales, you're starting to get some results, like how do you gauge success? Like what is it that we do with this? And what are the next steps to be sure that you maximize on the success that you're getting? First, I'm going to talk about our metrics that matter. Absolute king of the hill. As I say here, the absolute king is ROAS. That's return on ad spend. The amount of dollars that you get back for the amount of dollars that you invest in ads. That metric is king, and it's, as I say here, the throne is so tall that none of the other metrics can see it. ROAS is absolutely the first thing that we look at, and it's such a great indicator for like how an account can grow, like how kind of hard we can push an ad campaign and maintain profitability and maintain viability. Like how much of a return do you need to see on your ad investment in order for your business to continue to profit? Um, so we want to know that. That's like that's a really important metric to have in mind. That's like the most important metric to have in mind. It's also a great way to judge the success of an ad campaign. What was our ROAS on this one? Maybe this one is 3 times, and this one is 45 times. That's really good information to know in terms of like what we lean into and how we budget for that and where we give our energy. And are those two ad campaigns affecting each other? Is one of them driving ROAS higher for another one? That's all how this ecosystem works together. Another thing to balance with that is LTV. That's lifetime value. That is how much you expect to make from a new customer that you bring in over the course of all of the time that they're going to interact with you. That's not just this one time where they purchase something from you. That's this singular purchase and every purchase that may likely follow it, including immediate upsells after they click the ad, or coming back to your site a week later, a month later, or 10 years later. You know, maybe they buy a guitar from you today and they need strings for it or a pick for it, or they want a branded strap that goes with their guitar later, or they want to buy, education for it, or, whatever that is. Those are other things that you can sell to them later on. So how much money you're going to make on them, likely, given all the things that they're likely to buy from you and the patterns that the customers that you have now typically take. Some of them buy just the one thing, some of them buy everything. So how does that balance out? What do you tend to make from them, and how quickly do you tend to make that? That all informs our choices here, because if you have a very high lifetime value, for instance, and you achieve that lifetime value like relatively quickly, then it might make more sense to accept a sort of a lower ROAS number for your initial sale. So you don't have to make all the money on your one sale, because you're going to get that over the lifetime of that customer's interaction with you. You're going to make that money back relatively quickly, and it's going to be a large amount of money. So if you make less of a profit on that first sale, or even use it as a loss leader and don't make a profit on that, that's still going to end up being really good for you, because you end up making so much money on having brought that new customer in the first place. On the flip side of that, if your customers continue to buy from you, but they do it at really long intervals, and you might not see them again for another 5 or 6 years, that's still very valuable, and that's something to consider. But so is working capital, and you can't necessarily push your ads as hard and like push that ROAS number down as hard in the short term, because you'll cook through your capital in the meantime. You'll have cash flow problems, and there's that to also balance against everything else. So how your business operates and how your customers interact with you has everything to do with how you balance ROAS and LTV, and uh, how that's going to affect a strategy for your ad campaigns. Those are really important things to understand. The last thing that I want to say here is on reinvestment. And this is something that like is on our minds a lot, because we see oftentimes we'll work with a client and we'll bring them a ton of success right away, and they'll get really excited because they have all of this new revenue and all this new profit, and they as a business have needs. They might have debt they want to clear, they might have a new hire that they want to do, they might want to build a new facility or launch a new product. They have all these things, and now they have money to do those things, and that's great, and that's what we want for the companies that we work for, is to inspire growth in that way. However, if all of the money that comes in from that first new batch of revenue and profit gets allocated to other things like that, then there's no room to continue that growth through ads. So then you get stuck at the very bottom rung of the ladder, and you can't keep scaling up the ladder. So rather, what we always hope is that before an ad campaign starts, that there's a decision to allocate a certain amount of new profits to reinvest into ads if it's successful, so that that success can continue to exponentially grow. They can continue to take that next step and the next step and the next step. And understand, when I say that, it doesn't matter how successful something is right away. We wouldn't recommend that somebody suddenly 10x their ad budget. something like extreme like that. We would never ask for that, and not just because we would never ask for that much of the chunk of the new profits, but because for digital advertising that doesn't work. Ad platforms respond very poorly to very sudden changes like 5xing or 10xing a budget or even 2xing a budget overnight. They don't respond very well to that. It's much smarter instead to sort of scale in and pace yourself in very slowly and let the ad platform get used to the changes that you're making and let it like move along with you and grow a little bit more slowly. So in that respect, we might take a 20% ad spend at a time sort of approach to like move things up a little bit at a time. And that 20% of ad spend growth, that might, depending on how your business is organized, that might look like 1 or 2% of your new profits that you got from the initial venture. It might be less, it might be more, but it could be something in that low number. So then, yes, keep like 99, 98% of your newfound profits and enjoy those and do whatever you want with your business. Raise your own salaries or, set off on a new venture, but keep to the side a little bit so that you can continue to experience even more of that growth. So you can raise your salary again, so that you can come out with even more products, so that you have a whole budget set aside already to push this new product too with ads. Um, so that's something that we want to keep in mind. We don't see businesses do that consistently. We often see businesses get stuck at that first rung of the ladder, and we don't want that. So that's why we're giving that information now. We're hoping to encourage you to make better choices. So I would then like to invite you to get in touch with us. This has been great. I really appreciate you spending time to listen to what I have to say. We're here to offer information. I know that everybody's circumstances is very unique, so I want to invite you to reach out to us. Either visit us at bluefusion.com. You can reach out to me directly. My email is josh@bluefusion.com. Feel free to get in contact if you have any questions or there's something you want to just talk through really quickly. There's no pressure, and there's a no obligation or anything like that. We just would love to. We love talking about this stuff, and we'd love to find out what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what challenges you're facing, and see if we can offer any more guidance besides what we've provided here. So again, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to go through this information and share it with you. So I hope to hear from you. Thank you so much. Take care.